I'm calling the Oversight Board for the successor agency of the Redevelopment Agency of the City of Hawaiian Gardens to order at 3 p.m. Mel Lazuka. Board Member David Elfatel.
Here.
Board Member Becky Blair.
Present.
Board Member George Franzen.
Present.
Board Member Michael Gomez.
Here.
Board Member Gordon Stevenhagen.
Here.
Board Member Joe Colombo.
Here.
You have a quorum. Do they need to excuse? Okay, don't have to worry about that, okay. Okay, then if everyone would stand for the flag salute, please. It's directly behind you. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And while you're standing, if you would, in front of you, you have an oath of office that you can read along, and you'd all raise your right hands, please, and repeat after me. I state your names.
I, Michael Gomez,
Do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully
and that I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties upon which I'm about to enter.
discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter.
Congratulations. And if you'll sign at the bottom, and then I'll sign later for you and make your copies. Nominations are now open for the chair for the board.
I'll nominate Mike Gomez.
Are there any other nominations? Nominations will close. All in favor for Mike Gomez?
Aye.
Congratulations. Okay. Now our nominations are open for vice chair of the board.
I'll return the favor, nominating Gordon Stepenhagen.
Any more nominations?
George Franzen.
More nominations? Then I'll close nominations. All in favor of Gordon Stevenhagen, please raise your right hand. All in favor of George Frazen, please raise your right hand.
I don't have a problem with it.
Mr. Frazen. Yes. Congratulations.
Okay, George. Okay. I guess now we move on to oral communications. This is time reserved for members of the public wishing to address the board on any matter not otherwise on the agenda and within the jurisdiction of the Oversight Board. Speakers shall address all comments to the chair member and the board as a body and not to any particular board member or member of the staff. Speakers shall be limited to 3 minutes per speaker. Anybody wishing to speak, please step forward. I see no one. We'll close the public comments. And just before we move on, I just mentioned because we have one of our council members here in the audience observing, Councilmember Rodriguez. Okay. Go on to item G, discussion items, introduction of board members and successor agency staff.
Because this is our first meeting, let me introduce myself. Omar Sandoval. I'm the city attorney and attorney for the successor agency because the city of Hawaiian Gardens is the successor agency for the former redevelopment agency. Because we're all new, we thought that we put on the record and introduce ourselves and who appointed us or what agency we are representing. And if the mayor wants to start, going around the board members and then the staff here present, we're going to introduce ourselves as well.
Okay. We'll start on the far left with Mr. Colombo.
Yeah, my name's Joe Colombo. I represent the labor organization. My name's Joe Colombo. I represent the labor organization here in the city. I'm also the community development director, and I've been appointed by the city council.
My name's Gordon Steffenhagen. I'm a resident of Norwalk, and I just retired from Norwalk City Council after 18 years, and I've been appointed by Supervisor Kanabe.
Okay, I'm Mike Gomez, and I'm the mayor of the city of Hawaiian Gardens.
Yes, I'm George Franzine, resident of Bellflower, California, and I was appointed by Don Kanabe.
Becky Blair, I'm a resident of Long Beach, California, and I was also appointed by County Supervisor Don Kanabe.
Dave Alfatel, Chief Financial Officer for Cerritos Community College District, appointed by the Chancellor's Office, Community Colleges.
Okay, I already introduced myself. To my right is City Clerk Sue Underwood, and we nominated her to be the secretary, and we'll take an action pertaining to that later on. As you can tell, she's very excited. And in front of me,
Ernesto Marquez, I'm city administrator.
I'm Bill Kelly. I'm a consultant to the city and the successor agency.
My name is David Song. I'm the finance director of the city of Hawaiian Gardens.
Okay, thank you, and I hope it'll be a pleasant relationship that we develop as we go forward. We'll move on to item number 2, presentation pertaining to the purpose and role of the Oversight Board.
Yeah, I'm not going to spend a lot of time regurgitating the memorandum that we put together, but just to summarize, as you all know, the state of California has dissolved redevelopment agencies and established that the cities that created the redevelopment agency could become the successor agencies unless they waive the right or the obligation to do so. The City of Hawaiian Gardens did, in fact, adopt the resolution accepting the role of successor agency. When the state dissolved the redevelopment agencies in their legislation, they created your board, the requirement to establish an oversight board and established how the board members would be appointed. There are 7 board members, and the appointments are 2 by the county, 1 would be at large, 2 by the cities that created the redevelopment agencies, 1 for the community colleges district, 1 for the county board of education, and then 1 for the largest taxing agency, which in the city of Hawaiian Gardens would be the fire district. It just so happens that the board of supervisors sits as the ex officio board of directors of the fire district, so ultimately, the Board of Supervisors appointed 3 members to your board. So we do have 7 board members appointed, and today is our first meeting. The statute identifies the rules, the obligations of the Oversight Board. Your obligation, your duty is to the taxing agencies. So your duty is to preserve and look out after the taxing agencies that are entitled to taxing revenue or property tax revenue that otherwise in the past would have gone to the redevelopment agencies in the form of tax increment. And I can explain what tax increment is, but I forgot since it doesn't matter anymore. I used to be able to explain what that is. Actually, I can still explain it because to the extent that there is outstanding obligations of redevelopment agencies, the successor agency and the oversight board are required to oversee how those how the tax increment continues to be allocated to pay back and to retire old obligations. The idea is to retire the obligations as soon as possible and to dissolve the redevelopment agencies and their obligations as soon as possible, so that in the end we don't have outstanding obligations, we don't have redevelopment agencies, and the property taxes are then allocated pursuant to the California Constitution and not pursuant to old redevelopment law. Until that happens, the redevelopment law is still applicable in the state of California. As you will see when we talk about the recognized obligation payment schedule, there are outstanding bonds, outstanding obligations that we will be discussing later on today. In the meantime, there's a couple of actions that the successor agency is required to take that the Oversight Board is required to review and approve. Most dealing with payment of ongoing obligations, any disposition of real property, it has to be approved by the Oversight Board. Any new agreement or any amendment to an existing agreement requires Oversight Board approval. Pretty much most of the financial decisions that the successor agency would take in furtherance of dissolving the redevelopment agency require Oversight Board review and approval. In addition to that, your actions are not effective for 3 days because the Department of Finance has the right to ask to review your actions. So in that 3-day period, the Department of Finance can ask the successor agency to review the Oversight Board's actions. And once they do that, then the Department of Finance has 10 days to review the action and take any action they deem appropriate with respects to the Oversight Board's actions. The Department of Finance can ask that the Oversight Board reconsider a particular decision. And at that point, once the Department of Finance determines that they're going to review an action and make a decision on that action within that 10-day period, then the Oversight Board is required to act on the Department of Finance request, and the action by the Oversight Board will not be effective unless the Department of Finance then also agrees and approves it. So there's all these checks and balances built into the statute, but you're the first line of defense under the statute with respects to review and approval of successor agency actions. And I can go over each point in the statute pertaining to the Oversight Board. I think that's general overview of why you're here and why you're not getting paid. I forgot to mention that the statute specifically says that you are not to get any reimbursement or any stipend for your participation in your service. But I suppose we are, that's just the way the state created the statute. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them or explain any other provision. We did attach to the staff report the full text of the statute that applies to the Oversight Board, and I'll be happy to go over any one of those items with you. Okay, seeing none, we can go on to the next item.
Okay. Item number 3 is a consideration of a resolution establishing the regular meeting location, date, and start time of board meetings. So I guess that's... Do we have a recommended time frame of when we should have the meetings?
Well, this Wednesday, first of all, we would recommend that you set monthly meetings, if not bi-monthly. Again, you're not getting paid, so I'm sure you don't want to meet every month or every week.
Right.
But you can if you wish to do so. Normally, successor agencies will act every 2 weeks because the meetings of the successor agency coincide with the city council meetings, and the city council meets the second and fourth Tuesdays. Which is why a Wednesday works for the Oversight Board to then review decisions by the City Council. Or we can, whatever works for the majority of the board, of all the board. I mean, obviously, we would like all the board members to attend these meetings.
So you're saying you recommend once a month?
At a minimum, I mean, we can still call special meetings, and we have a resolution that talks about that as well. Right now, we just want to, being that this is the Brown Act board, we should have a regular meeting so that we know when the deadline for posting an agenda is for regular meetings, because any other meeting outside of that regular meeting will be a special meeting, and which has different requirements under the Brown Act.
Okay. So is there, I'll throw it to the floor.
Is there a time during the month that's better to coordinate with the city council, i.e. like the first week of the month or the last week of the month?
Last week of the month is probably best, because second to the last week, we'll have the council meeting that will give us time to prepare staff reports and post it and provide it to you ahead of time.
So if there's nothing to meet about, we'll cancel the meeting?
Correct. So if there's nothing to meet about, we'll post a notice of cancellation.
Okay. The reason I ask is I also got appointed to another city, Oversight by Mr. Kanabe, and they just don't know when they're going to meet. I mean, they came right out and said, I don't really know, and they're sort of looking at every 6 months. And they just don't know with the State Department of Finance involved and everybody else. So, but I'm just curious, but that's fine. You know, whatever you want to do, I'm okay, but...
Well, just are there, as you said, there are not that many obligations for your agency. So are there matters that the successor agency will be dealing with, or that would require our oversight?
Well, we don't foresee a lot of activity except for the beginning. Obviously, today is more of an introduction, and because of the way the statute is written, the Department of Finance wanted us to present the ROPS, or the recognized obligation payment schedule, before, I believe it's before the end of this month, which is why we had to hurry up and set the first meeting.
Right, but then...
but then after that, there's really no timeline other than, we do have, and we have distributed, the agency does own a lot of properties that we'd like to go over with the Oversight Board to get direction on, actually make recommendation as to how to dispose of those properties. Again, that's part of dissolving the agency. We need to dispose of those properties. And we were hoping we can have a meeting next week, in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, to go over that, to go over the properties. It's not a big hurry, but, something that we need to keep moving. But I think that after the first 6 months, there probably won't be a need to be having regular meetings.
Well,
it's not a large agency, and we don't have a lot of issues.
Well, then, again, looking at it, if we set it up on a monthly basis, and if there was not an agenda item, then of course it would be canceled, but at least we're not having to go through the special committee meetings and
Correct.
special notice. So
Yeah.
I would think that if we, and again, I would defer to staff as to the timing of that based upon your council agendas. So.
Yeah, I would agree. I think a monthly meeting would work out fine. Set it up and just stick with the fourth week maybe, and, that, because you got a council meeting the week before, I guess, so whatever everybody feels like.
If I may, the fourth Wednesday works perfect for me. Or the second Wednesday, but...
So I think with pretty much of agreement, maybe the fourth Wednesday will work, and that'll be our second meeting of the month. And then, as I said, we report anything that needs to come to the board from the city council meeting.
Looking at the same time.
Would be, yeah, that's another question. Time was 3 o'clock okay with everybody? Did we head today? Okay.
It's okay. So that would be May 23rd, Mike.
Would be the next meeting.
Can we meet on May 9th?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Does
it was
that
agreed to the
Does
4th?
that require a motion?
Yeah, if someone can move to adopt the resolution with fourth Wednesday of the month at 3 p.m.
So moved?
Second. Okay.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, 4th Wednesday at 3 o'clock.
That's the 23rd, Mike.
Next would be the 23rd. Okay.
Good show.
Okay, next item, number 4, consideration of a resolution affirming the designation of the Secretary of the Oversight Board and designation of the identified points of contact for the Department of Finance inquiries.
Okay, as I indicated earlier, the Department of Finance does have oversight of the Oversight Board. And the statute requires that we designate, or that the Oversight Board designate a point person that the department would contact to request review and request information. The proposal, and we have a resolution proposed for you to adopt, is to do various things. Number one, to formally designate the Secretary of the Oversight Board, and that the city clerk serve as the Secretary of the Oversight Board. Next, that the city administrator be designated as the Department of Finance point person, with the finance director, David Sung, serving as the alternate. Third, that the city administrator, well, actually, those are the only two recommendations of this resolution. So that, this resolution would appoint a secretary and also designate the city administrator and the finance director as the point persons for the Department of Finance.
I'll make a motion to approve the recommendation.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Item number 5, consideration of process for agendized future Oversight Board agenda items.
We wanted to make sure that we all understood how we were going to put items on your regular agenda or special agendas. And, following, this is the general process we follow at City Hall for City Council agendas, and it's also consistent with the Brown Act. Unless the board decides to change any of these procedures, the recommendation is that the chairman of the board can work with the secretary to put together the agendas. So, let me see. So we have, here's the process. The chairperson would work with the agency staff, in this case the city clerk, to put together the agenda and the agenda items. Also, the successor agency staff, working with the city administrator, would identify the items that would be agendized for your regular meetings or special meetings. And also, again, pursuant to the Brown Act, any member of the Oversight Board can request that an item be agendized. That request can go through the chairperson, but if the chairperson does not agree, then you can bring it up at a meeting. There's an exception in the Brown Act against discussing items not on the agenda, and that exception is for items that are to be placed at a future agenda. So you can discuss whether to agendize an item or not. So by motion at one of our regular meetings, you can request that an item be agendized for a subsequent meeting or a special meeting. And that's the process that we're proposing that we follow. And unless you want to change that process, we put it on the agenda today for you to discuss that, agree, disagree, or to establish your own process. One of the things that we were thinking about is, and the city clerk asked me earlier today, should we be putting together bylaws for the Oversight Board? I think it's a good idea, and to the extent that you agree with this process, we would put it in a bylaw that we would present to you at your next regular meeting for you to adopt, and you'll have it, in writing.
I'll make a motion to approve the recommendation as stated.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. So moved. Item number 6, consideration of resolution approving the successor agency's enforceable obligation payment schedules.
Okay, let me introduce this item as well. Pursuant to the Redevelopment Dissolution Act, before the redevelopment agency was dissolved, it was required to adopt what it called an obligation payment schedule that was then going to be used by the successor agency to adopt a recognized obligation payment schedule. And what that is, it's a schedule of the debts and obligations that are required to be paid with the tax increment monies that normally flowed to the former redevelopment agency. The City Council, sitting as a successor agency, pursuant to the law, adopted the recognized payment obligation schedules. These schedules are required to be adopted for a 6-month period, and it's normally due 1 to 3 months before the next succeeding 6-month period is coming up for review. Being that the statute is now almost a year old, the successor agency has in fact adopted 2 recognized obligation payment schedules. One that covers the payments for obligations that were due to be paid from January through June. And then the second recognized obligation payment schedule covers the subsequent 6-month period, which is July through December of 2012. Those are the 2 recognized obligation payment schedules that are before you for you to review and approve. We have our finance director who can explain all of the obligations, and also you have this 3-ring binder that has the 2 agreements that are listed in the second page of the schedule. You have the first page of the schedule which lists all of the outstanding bonds. And the bond documents we have not provided to you, but we can provide to you upon request. And in fact, we probably will have copies of those available to you. They're going to be thick documents. And I don't know if David wanted to say anything about those.
Yes, we do have those bond documents in our office for your review.
The second page talks about, we have 2 agreements between the city and the redevelopment agency. Those have been provided to you today. The first loan agreement was entered into in 1999. So you see a 10% interest rate on them. 1999, 10% was more or less, I think interest rates at the time were about 13, 14% in the regular market. And I think that 10% at that time was deemed to be reasonable. The agreement does have a repayment period through 2013. Unfortunately, the agency has not paid back the city pursuant to those agreements, which is why they're today on the recognized obligation payment schedule. I do want to disclose that under the statute would wipe out this particular agreement, but there is legislation, AB 1585, that is proposing to allow the Oversight Board to authorize repayment of this obligation. And so until the state legislature acts on the cleanup bills, we are going to include these in the recognized obligation payment schedule. And if you have any questions pertaining to this, the loans were made because in 1999, there were obligations of the agency that the agency just could not meet. There was not sufficient tax increment to pay these obligations. So in order to continue to operate as a redevelopment agency, the city had to provide seed money for the agency to continue its operations. And that's what this agreement is about. It was initially $3.2 million. That were to be repaid, let me see, looks like 15 years. 14 years. The loan proceeds were going to finance redevelopment activities within the project area. And in fact, some of the obligations that you see, the last two on the second page, after the CRAF, the OK Tires, the Auto Commercial Rehabilitation and Beautification Programs, those are all redevelopment programs to help businesses to rehabilitate their properties and eliminate blight in some areas. And if you're interested, we can bring photographs of some of the properties that actually were rehabilitated with some of these redevelopment programs. The reason why these items are in this recognized obligation payment schedule, I want to explain. The agency, these programs are no longer going to be on the books. In fact, in the next budget cycle, city staff is asking the city council to make them a city program. But these particular programs here and items that are listed in the recognized obligation payment schedule were funded by the agency before the Dissolution Act was enacted. And it's a two-step process because it deals with rehabilitation of existing properties, and because you're using public funds, it requires project specifications to go out to bid and get bidders. So the first portion of the program provides money for engineering and architectural studies and plans to be put together. And those have been completed for these properties. But after the plans were completed, and we were to the point where we could actually go out to bid to do the actual rehabilitation, the construction work, the Dissolution Act took place, and so we put those programs and those projects on hold. So we have money invested in a rehabilitation program where the money is already there and the plans are shelf ready, and we couldn't complete it. And what we're asking the Oversight Board to approve, because there are redevelopment programs, to go ahead and allow the agency or the successor agency to complete those projects. And that's why they're listed in this recognized obligation schedule. So the first two, we talked about actually the first one, which was a loan from the city to the agency to fund the agency back in '99 when it had run out of funding. The second item is the Esaport Green property. That one is very simple. The agency had entered into an agreement to sell property, the agency-owned property that is sold to a commercial developer for construction of a commercial project. It was to be a gas station with a convenience store. And it entered into the development agreement and disposition agreement, but the property owner, once they got the property, was not able to develop the property. Either they didn't get the financing, they couldn't develop it, and so they were in breach. And they claimed they were not in breach, and long story, make it short, litigation ensued. Breach of contract ensued, and the litigation then was settled. As part of the settlement, the agency agreed to take the property back for redevelopment purposes. However, the agency didn't have the money to take the property back and basically buy the property back from the developer and finish the litigation and part ways. And, litigation in the end, no one really wins but the lawyers. So at the time, it was prudent to settle the litigation and take the property back. Because the agency didn't have the money to pay $1.7 million to take the property back and settle the litigation, the city loaned the agency that money. And the second agreement is the one attached to Resolution 2010-31. It's basically a loan, so of $1.7 million, so that the agency can settle the litigation. And again, under the proposed SB 1585, this would be a recognized obligation payment schedule if the Oversight Board approves it. Once that legislation, that cleanup legislation is adopted. Let me see if the administrative costs, item number 3 on that second sheet, is administrative costs that are specifically authorized under the dissolution statute. And then the fourth item that I haven't discussed is CRAF. 3 years ago, when the state wanted to balance the budget, it actually required agencies to pay the state money, and it authorized the agency to borrow from the low mod housing fund, provided that the low mod housing fund gets paid. So CRAF is a supplemental educational relief something fund, augmentation fund, that's right. This is related to the ERAF, where the state takes money from redevelopment agencies to reduce the obligation to the schools, and therefore it's basically taking money from redevelopment agencies to meet the state's obligations to educational funding. So this CRAF is basically the paying back the housing fund, the monies that were borrowed from housing fund to pay the state for the CRAF. And again, that was authorized by redevelopment law 3-4 years ago. And that's what that is. That's what that obligation is in that schedule. If you have any questions about any of these, I'll be happy to answer them. And David Sung is here, who can also answer the specific financial issues pertaining to those.
Question on when you were involved in the working with property owners to improve their property, were those participatory agreements where they paid a certain portion and you paid a certain portion, or?
Yes, there were actually 80-20. The agency paid 80%, and the property owner committed to pay 20% of the cost.
Okay, but that's all now on hold until? Correct.
Right now, the first phase of those projects was completed. In other words, the architectural and the permits through the city, because they require permits. And some of these require permits from the cities or planning commission. All of those have been obtained.
Okay. Are the funds, the 20% from the businesses, have they been paid to the city, or are they in abeyance, or are they in an escrow, or where do those funds sit?
Yeah, they actually pay those first, and then the agency is more of a reimbursement. David, do you know how exactly those get paid? Oh, here's George Montana, who handles the project. George, we have a question on the 80-20 for the rehab programs. The question is, how is the 20% paid? When is it paid? Is it paid up front by the property owner, or is it reimbursed?
The construction phase is once we determine the cost of the construction, then what we do is we break it down to the 80-20 split. We present it to the owner. The owner then deposits the money as well as our portion into an escrow account, and then we draw down from the escrow.
Okay. So at this time, are there monies in escrow accounts for these projects?
No, not yet, because we don't know what the construction costs are going to be. We have an estimate of the construction cost, which I believe you have in the ROPS schedule.
All right, thank you. And then with respect to the loans to the agency, part of those, did those deal strictly with the acquisition of property, or were part of those loans basically to cover redevelopment budgetary cost of administration?
The second agreement for the support was strictly for litigation, actually for settlement funds. The first agreement for redevelopment fund deficit, David can address that.
The agency has been having a number of capital projects over the past few years, and the money spent is more than the tax increment revenue received, so causing the deficits, and those deficits are being...
But those were expenditures for capital projects and not for reimbursement of administrative cost of the agency.
That's correct. The administration cost is very low.
Okay, thank you.
I have a couple questions, if I may. How many project areas? Is it just one big project area, or how many?
The city is one project area.
And the first, the redevelopment fund deficit, the 5.6, I guess, $1 million loan, that's payable, what's the maturity date?
If you see in the handout you got today,
I see 726,000 is due this year, but I don't know if that's going to be the same the next 5 years, or...
yeah, if you see page 3, it was actually supposed to be paid, and the maturity date was actually June of 2013. However, I don't think these payments were ever made. So one of the things that is going to have to happen is that we're going to have to retire this debt and perhaps renegotiate the actual maturity date, move it forward.
The city loaned the money in 99, did I hear you say that correctly? 99 to be repaid by 2013?
The city has been loaning the agency money since 1999.
So I guess, so there is a maturity date, there's not,
According to the loan agreement here, is payback in 5 years. But because of the reality is the agency doesn't have the money, so it hasn't been paid back yet. And this ROPS, because we are required to put on there, so staff is just using the 5 years to amortize.
But the 5 years from 2012, not from 99, right?
No, we are putting the 5 years based on the outstanding loan balances.
And it's the same situation with number 2, the green support green property?
That's correct, sir. We're required to put into the ROPS, and then we just put it in there.
The administrative cost on number 3, how is that calculated?
It's based on the city's budget, and we prorated the first ROPS. We prorated 5 months out of the beginning February 1 to June 30th, 2012, and the second ROPS we use 6 months.
And so it's a certain percentage for certain staff members?
Yes,
something like that?
Yes, the second ROPS we put in as 3% of the tax increment revenue.
And then actually on the, you didn't talk about it, I don't think, unless I missed it, on page 1, I guess, the refunding bonds, those obligations. I assume there was money that came into the redevelopment agency or the city by doing those refundings? And how much?
You're talking about the 1999 refunding bonds?
In 04 and 04, 99, 04.
Yeah.
06, it didn't say refunding. I don't know whether that's refunding or not.
Right. The 04 refunding bonds is just to refund the previous outstanding bonds at lower interest rates.
Passed on to the bond, passed on to the taxpayers, or
yes.
The savings came into the redevelopment agency or the city?
we are required to have a savings in order to have a refunding months. So we calculated there is a savings to do the refunding months, and then we have this refunding months here before you.
So the savings came into the redevelopment agency?
Yes.
Okay. And so on both of those items, for number 1 and number 2?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
I have another question. Going back to this redevelopment fund deficit, was that the amount of the obligation, or has that been adjusted to cover the non-payment of the interest?
It's both.
Okay, so this is the original principal plus the accrued interest that hadn't been paid.
Exactly, and plus the deficits for the year.
Okay. Is there a way between now and our next meeting to break that down as to the original obligation and how much of that is unpaid interest?
Staff did
or is that
prepared a comprehensive list of the outstanding debt since 2006. That's right after the loan agreements and the resolution.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there any other questions? I know it's a lot to digest in a couple of minutes. Okay, if there's no further questions, I guess we'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion to approve the ROPS as presented by staff.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? If not, we'll take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Okay. Next item, H, is adjournment. It's, thank you all for being here. We'll adjourn this meeting to the next regularly scheduled meeting for May 23rd.
Before you adjourn, we do want to set maybe an adjourned meeting to go over the properties. Out of next regular meeting, our consultant who put this together is not going to be able to be here, so if we can set a different date to go over these properties, it would be great. Since we're all here today, hopefully you'll have your calendars. Maybe in 2 weeks. The second Wednesday, I heard is a good, the 9th, May 9th.
Okay by me, but I'm one.
I'm fine with that.
Good for me. We're here. Okay, do we need a motion to, or no, we're just going to be a special meeting?
If you want to adjourn to that, then it'll be an adjourned regular meeting. So if it's adjourned, though, we're going to have to close tomorrow. It's better if we call it a special meeting. But we'll give you sufficient time. The big handout is already in your hands, so it's just a matter of a staff report. So, we'll try and get a staff report a week before the meeting, and we'll notice it as a special meeting. Thank you.
Okay, that would be May 9th. That May 9th at 3 o'clock again, right? Okay, all right, thank you.